Hi again, everyone. As a follow-on to the video I did last time on all sort of the Cold War paperwork, well, not all, a very small selection of Cold War paperwork that I own, I wanted to do a little piece on the Republic of Ireland's preparedness for nuclear war during the Cold War. Unlike the UK, civil defence in Ireland continued on after 1968. The Civil Defence Corps in the UK was stood down in 1968, but it was retained in name. So there was still civil defence, but there was not a Civil Defence Corps. In Ireland, civil defence operated right through from World War II right up until present day. And they're still very much active today. And during the coronavirus crisis, they've been pretty active. This is probably one of their most active periods ever. From World War II, or the emergency as it was called in Ireland. One of the earliest forms of their civil defence preparedness manuals for nuclear war. Ireland never saw themselves as a target. They thought they may have a near miss. Obviously they would get fallout coming from the UK. They would get fallout coming from Northern Ireland. So they obviously had to warn the civil population about fallout. And this is Boss Baja. You can see Boss Baja, and that literal translation of that is life and death. And the sign up the top there, I'm not even going to try to pronounce that in case I get it wrong and offend anybody, is basically civil defence. So the book, there is a digital copy of this online if you don't want to look at it in any more detail, but essentially in very, very, very straightforward language, it tells you all about radioactive fallout and the effects of nuclear weapons. Now, Ireland did not have a siren network, so everything would have been done over the radio, over the television, and basically via the civil defence warden. So every town, city had their own civil defence warden. So the book is very, very straightforward, and if anything, it puts everything out in a lot, it's very, very similar to Protect and Survive obviously here, but it's a lot clearer language, a lot less they don't muddy the waters with different things and say, oh, you're all going to survive and everything's going to be fine. It's pretty, it is telling you in no uncertain terms that people will die, and hopefully you'll be one of the lucky ones. And as you can see as well, it takes more consideration for farmers. Obviously with Ireland, a lot more open countryside, there is a lot more farms, there's a lot more rural villages and housing. So it takes into consideration that there you can see how they're protecting livestock as well by getting cattle, and how the cattle is getting sick into its digestive system, and obviously the milk it'll produce then will be irradiated. So very, very interesting book. I was given a couple of copies of this when I was down with Irish Civil Defence at their former headquarters in the Phoenix Park at Ratra House in the Phoenix Park. And behind Ratra House is a civil defence training village, and it's still there today. It's called Bali Brusker, which basically stands for the town of rubble in Irish. And I'll put some photographs of that now up as I'm talking. And the site is incredible. It's still exactly as it was when they built it in 1951, with very, very, very few improvements made to it. And it's meant to symbolise as if a sort of a local Irish village has been hit by a nuclear bomb. So as you progress through the village, you're moving from churches, towers, things like that there, small townhouses, and then you're moving into the houses that would have been in the centre of Dublin. So you have cellars, coal cellars, things like that there. And it's all to teach the warden service how to go into these areas and then rescue survivors. And then there's an air raid shelter in there as well. But absolutely incredible. And I think it's one of the only surviving sort of Cold War period training villages left from the Cold War period. Definitely in the British Isles anyway. There was 3 or 4 dotted around the British Isles. Probably the most famous would be Easingwold in York, and then there was a couple up in Scotland as well. But yeah, very, very amazing experience to see all that, and my thanks again to Dublin Civil Defence for facilitating that and allowing me to sort of get some bits of equipment as well. They donated this to me, to the museum afterwards, which is an Irish sort of survey meter that was used by Irish Civil Defence. You can see there it was made in Shannon by ESS Limited, and it's very reminiscent of the PDRM 82. Works on C-cell batteries, but unlike the PDRM, it has a light, so it has a little light up display in there. Very, very, very simple. Only works on very, very high levels of radiation. Again, like the PDRM, works in centigrades per hour, and it'll go right up to 300 centigrades per hour. So yeah, pretty cool little device. Really glad to get my hands on one of those. You can see a little promotional poster here I'll put up on the screen, and you can see the Civil Defence Warden there is using one of these devices. But yes, pretty awesome to have one of these. These do come up for sale every so often. Probably not in this condition, but you never know. I think the last one I saw sold for about 20 euros. So if you do want one, expect to pay around that amount of money. As the Cold War progressed, obviously the data in this sort of became slightly outdated. So in the 1980s, they produced this magazine, or this booklet, should I say, which is obviously the Survival Booklet, a handbook for households, and then Learn How to Protect Yourself and Your Family in a Nuclear War. Now, as you can see, this very, very strange, it almost looks like it's holographic, and the camera doesn't really like it that much. But again, very, very, very interesting booklet, and it covers a very, very similar, content. Now you can see 1987 there, again produced by our Civil Defence, and it's probably a cross between Protect and Survive and this, in that it goes into more detail about fallout. It goes into more detail about how long for fallout will take to approach, and time periods and things like that there. You can see there it's even showing the effects of radiation, how it's, if anybody's watched Chernobyl, it's like bullets flying through you. And obviously there we have some black rain there coming down. But yes, very, very, very interesting book. Again, I have never seen another copy of this. Again, this came from Irish Civil Defence. And you can see there this person with radiation sickness here, how to work with casualties. So it's even covering basic first aid as well, doing chest compressions, things like that. But yeah, you can see there this gentleman here is quite unlucky. He's had some bit of debris fall on him. And then we have choking as well. So yeah, it's a pretty all-in-one booklet. And then we can see even making a rudimentary CBRN suit here, and then we have a stove there made out of an old bucket. But yeah, pretty lucky to get a copy of this. The head of our Civil Defence down in Dublin actually found this in a cupboard and asked me if I'd wanted it. He didn't even realise they had them, and upon closer inspection they had quite a few copies of it. But yeah, getting a copy of this was awesome, because as I say, I've never ever seen another copy of this before. But yeah, we'll now move on to talking about the Irish Observer Corps. Now, like the UK, Ireland took on the Observer Corps, and obviously they didn't call them the Royal Observer Corps, they would call them the Irish Observer Corps. And they were an army unit who would have been in control of certain sections of the Irish Defence Forces, and then certain sections of our Civil Defence. And it was their job to effectively carry out exactly what the Royal Observer Corps would have been doing in the rest of the UK. So with Northern Ireland being, only 90 miles away from the centre of Dublin, the border, obviously fallout or a near miss was going to, encroach into Irish sovereign territory. So the Irish Observer Corps were tasked with carrying out the warning and monitoring role that the Royal Observer Corps would have done in Northern Ireland. So this special army unit was set up, and I have some of their uniform insignia here. And you can see it's a heron, and it's holding a stone. And I have looked up what this meant, and it's really annoying me now. I think it's something always vigilant or always watching, I believe is the literal translation from Irish. So I have a couple of those there. And then I have their uniform patches, which is the tower. And you can see the flames around it. And the tower is obviously for their watching and their observing. But yes, so the headquarters of the Irish Observer Corps was in Griffiths Barracks in the centre of Dublin. As well as that, they would have had a cadre based in various military installations around Ireland. And one of those was in Costume Barracks in Athlone. And Athlone's right in the centre of Ireland. And it would have been the main headquarters for the Irish government. And that would have been where they would have been evacuated to. And the whole of Ireland then would have been run from the bunker in Athlone. Now, I visited there, I think it's going on about 3 years now. And unfortunately, the bunker, well, it's not really a bunker anymore. It was underneath sort of a precast concrete building, which was constructed in a way that if a nuclear bomb had gone off in the area, the building would have collapsed itself on top of the bunker to give it more fallout protection, which is quite clever when you consider that the bunker itself didn't really have any air filtration, didn't have much fallout protection, and had emergency exits which exited at ground level at the parade ground on the rear. So it really didn't offer that much protection. It was built in the late 50s, and at that time they obviously didn't know too much about fallout protection, and yeah, it would not have been suitable for a government to run a country from. Now, I've been putting up some photographs, obviously, of the bunker and what's left of it. They did gut it out a number of years ago, so very, very little remains of the actual bunker itself. But what I do have, and this will be probably the first time this has ever been seen, is some archive footage of the bunker in use during an exercise in what appears to be the early 80s, be late 70s, early 80s. And it's pretty incredible as it shows people, Irish Observer Corps members and civil defence members, operating together in the nuclear bunker in Athlone. And yeah, it's pretty awesome. So yeah, I'll run that now.
You can have it.
But even if this island as a whole were to be spared a direct nuclear attack, radioactive fallout is no respecter of frontiers. In the late 1960s, Britain disbanded its civil defence corps. Ireland did not, and earlier this year, at their Athlone headquarters, they prepared for the worst. This was their modest scenario. 6 nuclear strikes on strategic targets in Britain. The largest, 2 megatons on Coventry, devastated for the second time in this century. The strike came at 18 minutes past 6, and strong easterly winds have already begun to carry radioactive fallout across the Irish Sea, across the coast, and into rural Munster. So, from a war that was presumably none of their making, Ireland inherits a bitter legacy.
Okay, that's it for now.
Now check those now again.
Right, we've got 0018.
Limiting casualties now depends on accurate information, size, location and time of explosion, and prevailing weather conditions. Much of that information will come from Britain via Northern Ireland. The communications already exist. Data coming into Northern Ireland headquarters, known in International Aviation Code as BEL, is fed to Athlone. And in spite of Irish neutrality, there is evidence that the traffic will be two-way. They have already undertaken joint exercises. For the tens of thousands here, without a place in a military, government or communications bunker, information and advice will be vital, and radio may be the only surviving means of disseminating it. For a number of years, the BBC has maintained a national emergency control centre and a number of protected transmitters known as deferred services. They would form the basis of WTBS, the Wartime Broadcasting Service. It has never been fully tested on a national or regional basis, but last February, from their emergency studio in Athlone, late-night listeners to RTE Radio 1 were given a foretaste of post-nuclear broadcasting.
Fallout is now imminent at all places within 12 miles of these towns. All persons within these areas should take cover immediately. I repeat. Fallout is now imminent at all places within 12 miles of these towns. All persons within these areas should take cover immediately. Fugra inish the Gunde Port Lariga. Shiantamanish no Lahortaresha Hain. Seo é an fugra dearnach faoi as tidab don counter don Garvan.
While no similar tests have been carried out in Britain, material for transmission at times of high political tension or after a nuclear attack is already prepared. Its tone is calming and reassuring. Its content alarming in its naivety and near complacency.
And there you go. Hopefully you find that interesting. It's a quite nice bit of archive footage there of the bunker in Athlone. And I would imagine there is probably a lot more footage probably hiding in RTE archives somewhere. You could see there from a couple of the clips in that there was quite a lot of information being passed between the Republic of Ireland, Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. I think about 3 or 4 years ago, I was given the original telephone from Royal Observer Corps Western Area Headquarters, which was in Goose-Nair in Preston. And I have the original telephone. I've put a picture of that up on the screen now. But you can obviously see that, you know, there would have been a lot of information being passed backwards and forwards between, you know, the two organisations and the two countries. But yeah, that's a little bit, quite a sort of compacted history of nuclear preparedness in the Republic of Ireland during the Cold War. There's a lot more I could go into, but this video would be, you know, over an hour long. They did share equipment, they did share information. Quite a lot of Royal Observer Corps equipment has turned up in the Republic of Ireland. And, you know, a lot of Geiger counters as well in the early stages of the Cold War were being shared as well. So, you know, the Republic did not have Royal Observer Corps posts. They didn't have the little monitoring posts, but Civil Defence would have carried out that job, you know, in and around the country and in their own sort of headquarters. And there's quite a lot of infrastructure still remaining down there. I've still got to go to Sligo to see a nuclear bunker there. Once the sort of the lockdown of the pandemic ends here in Ireland and Northern Ireland, I've got that to do. And I've got to go down to Limerick as well. Under Limerick Town Hall, there's a nuclear bunker there as well. And I have to go down and see that. So yeah, constantly finding new places and new things to see. But listen, as always, thank you very, very much for watching. And I'll see you all again next time. Bye-bye.